the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Trish.
Mrs. Brew?
Here.
Mr. Kramer?
Here.
Mr. Manini? Mr. Moraro?
Here.
Mrs. Steigerwald?
Here.
Motion to excuse Rico.
Support.
Who was the support?
I didn't.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini? Oh. Mr. Moraro?
Yes.
Mrs. Steigerwald?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes. Approval of the agenda as presented.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I support.
Mr. Moraro?
Yes.
Mrs. Steigerwald?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Move on to approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 25th, 2024.
Make a motion to approve the regular minutes of November 25th, 2024.
Support.
Mrs. Steigerwald?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Moraro?
Yes.
Approval of manifest 2024-22. Ricky, did you have any questions?
No.
Brett?
Thank you.
Jeff?
Two quick ones, Madam Mayor. Page 4 of 6. 4 down from the top, OpenGov. Computer expense 2393.41 for a year period. What is OpenGov?
So that is part of our GIS system. That is how we use that software to, Brock can actually speak probably better to this, but to enter in data on your phone or on your computer into the GIS.
Are we using it, Brock?
Brock and Scott.
So if I called you tomorrow and said I want to see a great report out of OpenGov, you'd have it all set for me? Awesome.
That's actually what we use at locate sites.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's becoming more user-friendly, and everybody is going to learn how to use it.
Thank you. Moving on under water fund. Last item, GEI consultants. What engineering we got going on right now for 427809?
That's probably DWAM.
DWAM?
That's reimbursed.
Okay. Okay. That's all I had, Ken.
I don't have any. Do I have a motion on the manifest?
A motion to approve manifest number 2024-22 in the amount of $238,620.38.
I support.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Moraro?
Yes.
Mrs. Steigerwald?
Yes.
Move on to public comment. Anyone in attendance wishing to address the council on any item of interest shall do so now at the podium. State your name and address for the record. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. The council will not engage in discussion or debate during a public comment. If the matter needs further discussion, the council will direct the city manager to place the item on the future agenda. We have the same under public comment if anybody has comments on this agenda. If not, we'll move on to discussion item number 1, 2023-2024 audit. Scott?
All right, so I sent over to Dan this morning, just the PowerPoint, but if you've got the audit in front of you, a lot of this, I pull out of the executive summary into here, into the PowerPoint, so I see Ricky had a printed out PowerPoint, but it's really in this executive summary, and I added a couple other things, but so just kind of go over that, and then if there's any questions, you know, just ask as we go through. So we finished up our audit, obviously with some staffing changes that the city went through. It was, I thought I was like, oh, this is gonna be an interesting audit. The new treasurer wasn't starting until after we got here. Natalie was not coming back at that point, you know, when we were here. And then you guys brought Marion, but she was not here the week that we were scheduled. So, but everything went really well. So just kind of hats off to the city staff. Lisa helped out a lot. Mary and Natalie had the stuff ready for us before we came and sent us a lot of stuff early. So I just wanted to, commend the city staff on that, that they were, with all the transitions of staffing, they made the audit, a lot easier than I was expecting it to be with all the changes, so. With that being said, like I said, I'll kind of go over everything. The annual financial report, that's this big document, that's the 73 pages. In this, there's the auditor's report with the unmodified opinion, highest opinion that the city can receive. Believes everything in here to be materially correct, and we wouldn't modify anything in here. And it has all your financial statements, all the required financial statements and the footnotes, and the supplementary information and the required supplementary information. So, who's driving this right now?
I am.
Oh, go ahead. Findings, and this is similar to the previous years. We prepare this 73-page document, so we're required to disclose that, and you rely on your auditors to prepare this, so it has to be disclosed and as a finding. Without your auditors, you wouldn't be able to prepare that report. And then the second one is the adjustments to the city's financial records, a significant deficiency, and that's normal. I think we had two entries that we had that caused this finding, but again, very normal for a city your size. I think one of the entries was setting up the garbage fund. We need some help with that, and then in the electric utility, I think the head gates project was expensed and not capitalized, and it was all over at the end of the year, and that's just something that Mary and Natalie missed. So nothing significant that you should be worried about there either. But again, required to disclose that. Internal control recommendations, journal entries. I talked through this with Dan on Monday. I met with Dan and Candy on Monday, and Kevin joined us as well. We just talked about having a better process on just closing up a little bit of an open end with journal entries, having more of a review process that who's posting the entries, somebody review them in a different manner. So that is in I think it is in here, a little bit more detailed, but on page 10. But yeah, that's just a recommendation that we had. All right, so then I'll just kind of dive into the financial results. We start with the water utility, so I'm going to go through all the utilities, then I'll get to the governmental funds. So water utility, you can see from an operating result standpoint, change in that position was a positive $468,000. Now, the one thing I do want to, before I dive into this financial information, during the fiscal year, the city received money from the state that went to your MERS pension plan. It was about 3.1.
2.7, I think.
Oh,
I was gonna say 3.6, so we're all close. 3,732,000 that, the state contributed to your MERS pension plan. And that was statewide for any municipality that was under 60% funded. And so with that, we had to do a journal entry as well for that to show that as a revenue across all funds allocated and as an expense. So I just wanted to point that out, as you can see right down here. This MERS grant, you'll see this on every line at 290. So water utility has $291,000 allocated to that. There was an expense related to that as well. Like I said, I just wanted to point that out now when we're going through all this. You'll see it in every utility, and then you'll see it in the general fund as well.
So Scott, is that why we're seeing the fund balance is healthier this year?
No, it has nothing to do, because it was a revenue and expense.
Yeah.
Just zero.
Zero.
Beautiful.
Because the funds didn't actually come through the city.
Right.
They cut it right to MERS, but we had to show it as a revenue and expense, because in a way it was, okay, if it came to you guys, it would be revenue, and then you guys would have cut a check to MERS, and then it would have been an expense. So, so no, that has nothing to do with your fund balance, but like I said, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, because it kind of did when we went through it, change some of the, when you looked at it because of that being allocated there.
But from an operating result, you can see, revenues just under $1 million, fairly consistent to the previous year. Expenses, slightly up, but again, part of that is that MERS expense as well. Interest income, interest expense, then the MERS grant, capital contributions of $191,000. That is the ARPA funds that you used up all the ARPA funds for your meters there. So that's kind of a one-time expense too. So the change in that position was a positive 468 for the water utility. You know, so from an operating results, it looks really good. Dan, if you want to go to the next one. But I do this every year for you guys, just from a cash flow standpoint, because sometimes in the operating results, you have depreciation and other things that you don't really see, you know, how's it affecting your cash? When you pay your bills, you make your debt payments, what do you have left? And the top line in all the utilities, net cash provided by operating activities, that is, once your customers pay you, once you pay your employees, once you pay your normal bills, that's what you have left over. So the water utility had $414,000. You transfer out $138,000 to the general fund for administration, and then your debt requirements are $281,000. So really, your cash used from water utility after debt was required was $5,200. Kind of like a break-even year from a cash standpoint. But what that's saying is you're not really generating enough cash to, you know, if you had any, you know, smaller capital needs to do. You know, the one thing I just want to point out, that deposit into the RRI account, that's just moving money from your checking to your savings in a way. That's required by your revenue bonds for your water utility. So that money is staying within the city, and that's able to be used for capital projects as well. So
if we didn't have to move that 18 into that specific account, we would be net positive, but not by a lot.
yeah. So like I said, it's kind of how I look at it, break-even year, which is going to happen from time to time. Sometimes you just have some expenses that you have. I know there was expenses related to the meter changeouts and other things. So you know, you're going to have those years as well.
Brock, do we have anything from a capital standpoint that was out of the ordinary this past year?
Not that I'm too familiar.
No.
Any capital items that you purchased wouldn't be in there, because if you go back, Dan, this is just strictly, that's sewer, there you go. That's strictly just expenses. So cash-wise or capital-wise, that's not even included in there. So if you purchase any capital that has nothing to do with it, this is what you have from just operating, and that's why when we get into the electric, you say, wow, we have a ton of money. Well, yeah, but you need to put aside money for capital. So this has nothing to do with any capital items that you.
That's not going to reflect that. That's not going to reflect that increase we did either, right? Because that ended in July.
We just started the increase.
Right, that's what I mean.
So that'll help next year.
That'll help for next year. Yeah, good. Okay. That's where I was going with that whole thing.
Yeah, that'll help for next year's budget.
I mean, if I were to look at water utility, yes, there was capital purchase of $190,000, but a lot of that was the meters that was put in.
Right.
So, and you can see $190,000, your capital contributions were $191, so that was a wash anyway.
Yeah.
So, so that's your water utility. Next, we'll slide into sewer. Just from an operating results, pretty consistent revenues, obviously, very consistent year to year. Expenses, same thing, you'll see a slight increase, but again, with that MERS grant, you see $274,000 was allocated to sewer. Transfer out, and so the ending number change in that position was a positive 184. Then we get to the cash side of things. This is where we've been, you know, I've been kind of talking to you about, you know, of all the utilities, this is the one that is probably in most need of a rate increase. I know you guys did do that, but this was just the results of 24 here. Net cash provided by operating activities, let's call it 400,000. Transfer to general fund 131, and then the debt requirements are 321,000, bringing your cash used from sewer utility to a negative 55,000. So, and then cash on hand, just unrestricted cash at the end of the year in sewer utility was 48,160. So if you had the same exact year that you had in that you're in right now, that you did last year,
We'll be underwater. The fund will be underwater.
sewer would not have any operating cash.
Yes.
But they do have 631,000 in restricted cash for all these revenue bonds requirements. So same thing, right? You're putting 47,000, yes, $47,000 aside for capital. So you have money aside for capital, but your operating is not. You're not maintaining enough cash for.
We have
Enough in rates for that, you think? Scott, did you look at the rate increase?
I don't.
I told him,
Would you-
we talked about it.
Or do we think we've got enough to offset that?
it'll help. We'd have to look at
Yeah.
exactly if it'll offset or not.
Okay.
But we do have, I think in sewer that has the larger RR&I fund, 300 and some thousand, so we just have to be more aware of what projects we can put into that we do throughout the year to try to offset. And I will say, for whatever reason, every sewer utility I've ever had has had a problem, and it's usually because of the amount of debt that's taken out because of a new facility that you always have to get.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just, for whatever reason, sewer utilities have just,
Yeah,
You know,
we're
like
working on, I mean, we're in the same boat, we're working on a rate increase for a municipality, and we just told them that you gotta go up 30% in the rates.
yeah. And like in the state of Wisconsin, where I work, their PSC would send us what the rate increase had to be based on our debt requirements to be cash sufficient. Here we don't have that, it's up to us, but yeah, so I don't know why, but sewer utilities sometimes just seem to struggle, so we're working on that, we'll be, we'll come out of this like we have other funds.
Yeah, and there was a couple larger expenses in the sewer utility that happened during the year. We talked about it on Monday, like $40,000 of kind of like one-time expenses that, might not be happening next year, but you never know. With the treatment facility, you never know what you're gonna have.
That's every utility, and, luckily like with these, we have RR&I, and generally those we can stuff into that.
Correct. So if you had any large capital improvements, sewers RR&I is, I don't have that off the top of my head. I know what the total is, but, they have money set aside for any large capital improvements. So, sorry, any questions? All right. Next one is your cable or communications utility. Revenue, up slightly, up 60,000 actually. A lot of it is internet driven. Operating expenses, fairly consistent. 1.6 million, a little bit of depreciation there. And then you can see the MERS grant, 318,000 was allocated there, bringing your change in net position to a positive 428. Your communications utilities had a good year. Go to the next one from a cash flow standpoint, positive 68,000 after the debt requirements are made. So that's generating enough cash there. So from a communications cable fund, not really anything to.
You want to buy it?
No. Is that a quick enough answer? When I sit here, I hear all the calls you get. No, I don't want that. Electric utility. So this is obviously your biggest utility. Obviously, you're running a power dam. You can see operating revenues, $4 million. Operating expenses, $3.2 million. Really consistent to the previous year. And then you can see the MERS grant here. Obviously, you have a lot of employees and a lot of retired employees from the utility. $1.1 million was allocated there. Bringing your change in that position to a positive 1.3 million. you know, so again, sewer, your electric utility, they always have a good year, but as I mentioned, you know, as you guys know, when you have a capital need at the electric utility, it costs a lot of money.
When stuff breaks, it's expensive, yeah.
Correct. And then even when you have to, you know, put a new transformer in, or you're putting underground lines in, it is expensive. So this one is more of we need to generate plenty of cash to fund things, especially when you have your own power dam. So net cash provided by operating activities, 1.5 million. Transfer to the general fund, 622. So really, after that is done, about 920,000 of cash. $600,000 of debt requirements, leaving 322,000 of cash. You know, the cash generated from electric utility after the debt requirements were satisfied. So electric utility had a good year. I don't think you did a ton of capital. I know the headgate projects was there. But I just want to look really quick. About $322,000 of capital was purchased during the year. So really, we look at that, cash generated from electric utility for operating, but then you pretty much spent 322 in capital. So it's really a, you know, kind of a wash there. So, but otherwise, you know, what's not in here is any interest income. You know, obviously the markets were good. Your utilities in total generated $174,000 of interest income, and that isn't included in here. You know, so like I said, your utilities in total are pretty good. The only one that I would say that you want to look at a little bit more is sewer, but communications, electric, even water, I would say is fairly good. You know, it's just slight increases there, but you know, sewer would be the one you might want to look into, and I don't know what your rate increase was. But, you know, so that's your utilities. Any questions on any of the utilities? Okay. So
Nice job, everybody.
I will then kind of go into the governmental funds. So here's all the governmental funds of the city. You have your general fund, and I'll go over that in a little bit more detail. But you can see a nice increase there. Then you have your major street, which 562,000 in your major street fund and 696,000 in your local street fund.
Nice.
What happened is that, you know, you didn't, your road project started after 6:30. So,
Yeah.
but, you know, that's normal, and that's normal for a city that you're gonna accumulate funds and then do some road projects every two or 3 years, whatever it is, because we all know paving roads is not cheap these days. So, then you have your downtown development, fire department, garbage fund. I'm gonna go over that in a little bit more detail, but that was set up new in 2024. So I wanna kind of combine that into when we're talking about the general fund and that garbage fund. So total governmental fund balances, go back just, $2.3 million in total of your governmental fund balances. All right, so this is your general fund. I tried fitting this all in one and it was tough, so it kind of comes over. But what I wanted to do is, this actually, if you were to flip to a page in your financial statements or in the executive summary, does not match. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to pull that MERS stuff out of here. Because putting that in makes it look really bad, because then the city's over budget, you know, just it looks really weird. So I'm like, for this, I wanted to show you guys, this is really how you guys operated. So this won't match if you flip the page.
In the big book?
Big book and little book,
Yep.
page 5, it won't match because I pulled out that MERS grant. All right, I just thought that's what we should be talking about, because but you can see your revenues, 1.6 million, and your expenses 2.5 million, bringing your excess of revenues under expenses to a negative 856. That's always normal for the city because you guys have those large transfers in from your utilities, which come to 1.2 million, and then that transfer out, the majority of that, or not, actually, I think it wasn't actually much. It was 46,000 was to your new garbage fund, and then I think you have a transfer out every year to your fire department, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the other piece. Bringing your net change in fund balance to a positive 193,000. But like I said, what I want to do is when we had all these, that MERS stuff, all these expenses were in here, and all these variances were negative from your budget, so it kind of makes you guys say, wow, you overspent your budget, not really, because there was.
Yeah, you would have seen like the police department spend an additional $550,000 because that was the.
Because of
And pension, yeah, right, pension locations, right.
Yeah, because the MERS grant that was allocated to the general fund was $1.6 million. So, and that, in the financial statement, that's shown in this line. But, like I said, I wanted to show this to saying, you know, you were almost right on with revenues. Yeah, you had a couple increases. This was, that was your school resource officer from the school that you had. This was down as interdepartmental charges because that is what you charge your local and major street funds for the use of their equipment. Slow year on snow, so you couldn't charge them as much. So that's why that is down there. But you know, overall revenue's good. Expenses, you were $355,000 under expenses in total. So like I said, from a expense standpoint, well under budget. And you brought up your fund balance while transferring money out and starting a new fund into the garbage fund. So that's what I kind of wanted to correlate. So really, from a standpoint, I'm going to go into the next couple slides. The general fund is in the best shape it's been since I've been coming here. So, and as you can see on this next slide, this is the general fund balance. And you can see it was consistent to 2022, but if you look at the blue column, that's your unassigned balance. That really shot up.
Yep.
Before, when it was in 22, you had a big chunk that was set aside for the garbage truck, right? And then you spent that down. So from a financial standpoint, like I said, your general fund, you can see the last 5 years. And then if we go to the next slide, this is just taken out of the text there. Governmental, you know, I'll just say, we like to see you anywhere from 15 to 20% of your general fund expenses. Again, I pulled out the MERS grant expenses because you shouldn't have money set aside for that one-time item. Where we would like to have you is 380 to 507 of your unassigned, and your unassigned fund balance.
We're at 190 and change, Scott, did you say?
What's that?
Oh, we're at 511?
You're at 511, which is 20.15%. So you,
Beautiful.
You're, I think last year was.
Oh, that's a way better than last year.
We
Oh,
were
my
hovering around
God.
6 to 8%. I'm more of a 25 to 30% kind of guy.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we're in the right direction.
Correct. So a lot of good progress has been made into
Good job.
the general fund of the city.
It was painful enough.
Yeah, plus,
Okay, now Rico's not here, no big tell him, because you know, the wheels will be spinning now, we can spend money with that guy.
so like I said, plus, you know, you had $3.7 million contributed to your MERS. So a lot of good things from a financial standpoint. I think the next, okay. But yeah, so the general fund is in a really good spot. I'm happy to see that, and just keep on maintaining it. Obviously, even though you had $3.7 million contributed to your MERS, the contribution isn't going down, you know, unfortunately.
And a lot would happen between that, I think it was in 22. That's when the MERS shot up because that's when our final group was closed. So we had I believe we had excess from the contributions went up excessively compared to the previous year. I thought it was 22, 23.
That was the last one retired with the old pension?
Yeah, because you guys closed the last group the January before I arrived. So I arrived a few months later, so they were finishing up that year's budget. And that year, because we had closed it in January, those MERS payments were going up. And now I think we've stabilized a little bit.
If you're interested in that, page 58 of the big book shows from 2015 to 23 all the MERS. You know, you can see in 2015 the city had to contribute $738,000.
What page is that on?
58.
58.
$738,000 the city was required to contribute to MERS in 2015. In 2023, $1,327,000. So.
Did it jump up somewhere in that? When did I start? In that 22?
It went from in 2019 it was 913. and then 2021, 1071, and then 1.3 million in 2022. So that's probably the year that you're thinking of. It did take a big jump there. So,
Down 20, it just came down to touch in 23.
yeah, so like I said, it's, I always like to look at that, and you can also see then the contribution. So at the end of the year, you were funded at 58%, which again is the highest you've been funded at in a long time, but you have a lot of retirees still on that plan. So it's, like I said, that's why that contribution is not going anywhere anytime soon. So, I just threw this garbage fund in here just because it was your first year, and I kind of wanted to show you guys just from a, you know, it was a lot easier to carve this out of your general fund and put it in a new fund, so you can really see, hey, is our garbage fund actually sustaining, and are we putting aside enough money when we have to buy a new garbage truck and we have to buy this stuff? So what I did here is, you can see your revenues, 301, expensive 639, bringing your excess of revenues over expenses of 62,000. Here was the transfer in of 45. So like I said, that was another thing in your general fund. It went up significantly with a $45,000
Transfer out.
that was in the general fund. So at the end of the year, your garbage fund has 107,000. You know, so like I said, it's kind of like utility, but it's not really. It's a special revenue fund, but you should be putting aside money for, you know, when that need of a garbage truck or anything else is. And I know the Dickinson County Solid Waste is always increasing their tipping fees as well. So you got to kind of stay up on that. So yeah, like I said, from the garbage fund, you know, this is your first year, and I think it was a good move for the city to put it into a fund of its own, standalone fund, and that's the operating results of that.
Yeah. And I like that too, because you can see the operating and.
It's out of your general fund,
Right.
and that's another thing is and that's another part of that 20%, right? You just pulled out $239,000 of expenses out of your general fund, so. You know, you're looking at that, saying what fund balance should we have? No, this is on its own now, and it has to stand alone, so our general fund balance doesn't have to carry this as well.
Now, the one thing we haven't done in the garbage fund yet is we did not transfer anything to the general fund. No, to the general fund for administrative costs. And we do a lot of administrative costs. We didn't do it this year because of a new fund. At some point, I would expect to transfer some money from garbage fund to general fund to cover administrative costs.
And billing, the billing
Yep.
costs.
Yeah.
Yep.
The cranky calls and everything else, just like you get with cable and the rest of them, right?
Yep. And so, you know, this is what I put in every year, but yeah, I mean, this year especially with like I mentioned in the beginning, as what I was expecting the audit to be and from our audit team, and it went as best as it possibly could, with not many people available at the city when we had it scheduled. And it's tough to reschedule our jobs because we have one right after another. So like I said, we made it work. Everything went well, so we appreciate it. So, but no, like I said, we're very happy with that. So that's all I have. I don't know if there's any questions.
Nice work and thank you.
I can let Rico know. I'll call him.
Yeah, don't let them know.
Thank you, Scott.
Yep.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks to the staff.
Yeah, and thanks to the staff and Mary coming in and Natalie coming in.
I'm the first one to bust them one. I ain't happy. Good job. Thanks, Scott.
Item number 2, cross connections.
All right, I'm gonna hold this. I'll speak very briefly, and then I'll turn it over to the
Thank
people
God.
that know what they're talking about, and our guests here from HydroCorp, and our 2 individuals from water and sewer. So just, I don't know if you guys are familiar with cross connection, but essentially is what we're supposed to be doing is checking all businesses, residential units that are connected to our water supply to make sure that nothing is backfeeding into our system. Certain businesses are considered more at risk, so they get inspected, say, every year. Residentials, I think you guys said, what, every 10 years. You have to report your your findings to the state and how many inspections you do. We have been sending in the appropriate forms for inspections. We've had difficulty finding kind of which of those properties were actually inspected and what those results were. So in some sense, we feel like we're kind of starting our cross-connection from scratch, starting over a little bit. The city does have a cross-connection ordinance and policy that's included in your packet, but because of the potential scope of starting fresh here, if we can't find all of our records, we're looking to a company like HydroCorp that can assist us in that entirety of that project. So I'll stop there, and Brock and Cheryl, do you want to speak on this at all before we turn it over to them, or do you want
I
to?
think we'll let them take it.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Paul Patterson with HydroCorp and Jenny Johan.
Welcome.
Thanks for having us up,
Yeah, thank
Dan,
you.
Madam Mayor, council members. Yeah, as Dan was saying, you know, in your packet, I did, there should be a copy of the actual rule from the state of Michigan. Public Act 399, Part 14. That's really what I'm here to speak to. I'm not sure if you had a chance to review that.
I did.
But Dan kind of hit it in a nutshell. You know, every utility in the state is required to have this program, required to inspect all water customers, commercial, residential, everybody. And it's set on different time frames depending on the situation, what they're using the water for, essentially. So things like car washes, funeral homes, medical facilities, would require more frequent inspection than most retail, you know, residential homes, things like that. You can stretch out over a longer period of time. With that, any questions on the rules or why this is required? Okay. And I'll let Jenny kind of talk about us and tell you
Yeah,
how we can help you.
so I'll go over a little bit more information, a little bit more details on HydroCorp. Paul, feel free to chime in as well. So HydroCorp, we're based in Troy, Michigan. We work with well over 300 different municipalities, communities in Michigan, and upwards of 600 nationwide. So we'll say our bread and butter really is around helping communities with their cross-connection control program. We have certified inspectors all across the state of Michigan, as well as across the country in the communities that we support. You know, that number is even low, 70,000 cross-connection surveys conducted annually. But it's not just about the inspections themselves. We actually provide a turnkey program that will really be the basis for making sure that your program exists and is compliant with EGLE regulations. You can go to the next slide.
Do you work with any other local around here, local municipalities around here?
In the UP, the closest would be Escanaba. We work with Escanaba, Gladstone, Nagani, Ishpeming, Munising, and we just started with Hancock.
Okay,
So a little bit of a footprint in the UP.
okay.
Do you have inspectors up here or mostly in Lower Michigan?
Honestly, we supported the UP a lot with our Wisconsin office.
Okay.
It's just closer.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, we have a lot of inspectors in Wisconsin and Michigan. That with both Wisconsin and Michigan have pretty stringent rules when it comes to cross-connection control. All states kind of vary based off their requirements. Michigan is probably the most heavily regulated as far as areas that I work in. I work in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Minnesota, and everyone's a little bit different in what they require. With that kind of goes along with our certifications and kind of the quality of our staff. So all of our inspectors are certified, ASSC certified. Some different states, require different certifications to have inspectors there. The other thing that's really great around HydroCorp is it's not just our inspectors that have the certifications. A lot of our administrative staff has those certifications as well. Those folks will be some that would be dealing with your constituents if they call in and have questions. We would be fielding a inspections and sending some of the letters that we have as far as scheduling and purposes like that. So they're well prepared to be able to answer those questions and answer them in an effective, timely manner. So everyone is really happy with the program as far as what's happening and why we're here helping to support the city. Anything else that you want to say about our experience or certifications, anything like that?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, perfect. Next slide. So Dan alluded to this a little bit, but really when we started talking with both Dan and Cheryl as far as kind of the existing state and some of the concerns, so, you know, overarching from a compliance standpoint, you are technically out of compliance based off of inspection frequency and what should be happening. A lot of it has to do with, you know, Dan and Cheryl kind of uncovering that a lot of the records, they don't actually know 100% for sure when the last time these inspections happened in accordance with the regulations and the frequency that needs to happen as far as Eagle is concerned. So again, that's why I say technically you're out of compliance, is because you don't really know. So there's that unknown there. So that's one of the bigger overarching issues. And then just the overall administrative burden that goes along with it. So yes, there's the inspections, but there's also the notifications that need to go out to the water customers. If a water customer is out of compliance because they do not have the proper backflow prevention assembly or device, you have to send compliance notices, do rechecks. So yes, you want to stay compliant, but ultimately it's about protecting the integrity of the water system and making sure that if there's a backflow event that happens, there's no hazards that can get back into the water system. So we address kind of a high-end overview is, again, we're doing the water customer engagement and notification. We're doing all the on-site actual inspections. Everything is housed in our software that is all accessible to you. That's all exportable into a, you know, Excel spreadsheet that a lot of cities we work with will use that and, you know, import it into other parts of software depending on what you guys have in the city. But everything is managed that way and stored. We do all the non-compliance follow-up and follow-through. We help you with the standardized Eagle reports that need to be done on an annual basis. And then long-term, on the test tracking management side of things, that's another piece of the puzzle, where not only do you have to report the number of inspections that are happening, there's also the actual testing of the assemblies that need to happen. So our database maintains all of that as well.
Is the software that you use something that many of your colleagues use as well, or is it something that you built specifically for your company to?
It's ours.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that that's a big differentiator is that we've seen, well, across the states that I work in, there are other companies who are just software only, and they provide kind of a basis for just storing the information. We have our software, but it's really purpose-built around compliance and around doing the inspections and taking all of the data that needs to be housed there and built purposely for that. So we're not a software company. We're, you know, a professional services inspection company that has the software to manage it.
Could you maybe, for our citizens, explain what happens when we do have a problem with that?
With a potential cross connection?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, would you mind talking through that? I'll let you do that.
Yeah, so, well, first off, I guess how it happens would be a good starting point. Essentially, there's two ways a backflow event can happen. There's two different types. One way is, it's called back pressure. So if you have we'll just use a boiler for an example. When you heat water, it creates pressure. It expands and it creates pressure. If that pressure becomes greater than what the city's supplying for some reason, you can start to push that water back in the opposite direction of where it's intended to go. So you get into your drinking water. Now what's in a boiler? Well, it's stagnant water for one. It should be a closed system, so the water doesn't get replenished and changed out. It becomes stagnant. There could be anti-scaling chemicals in it. There could be, you know, we live in wonderful cold weather. Could be antifreeze in the boiler, things like that. And cases of that have happened. In Wisconsin, I have a couple examples. They're both in schools, unfortunately, where treated boiler water with antifreeze was getting back into drinking water inside the school. Wasn't properly protected with a backflow preventer. And that's what we look for. We would look to make sure all of those are in place to prevent that from happening. The other way it happens, it's called back siphonage. And essentially, that's just creating a vacuum in the water system. You have a water main break. You have a sudden drop in water pressure. It can create a siphon effect, just like siphoning gas out of a gas tank. So that's just another way that this can happen. You know, I have Google alerts, so you see these things pop up. Things that can happen, you know, worst case scenario stuff. In Southfield, Michigan, this was years ago, some nematodes got into drinking water. It's a parasitic worm, essentially, and it was from a homeowner's lawn irrigation system that didn't have proper backflow prevention. They saw them swimming around in their water. So that, you know, that's one case. More recently, like on the extreme side, you know, down in Corpus Christi, Texas, they had to tell 350,000 residents not to touch their water. They had a major backflow event with an industrial plant, and 2 chemicals got into the distribution system. One was a emulsifying agent, and the other was hydrochloric acid. So it wasn't a boiled, you can't boil that stuff out. It was do not touch. Typically, you know, it doesn't get that extreme. That's a lot of things really have to go wrong.
Right.
It's just kind of a couple examples of what can happen.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So our recommendation from our project plan and what we would envision if the city would work with HydroCorp. Again, it's a turnkey program, so we would be starting out with ensuring that you have a plan in place, something that's written that is part of the eco requirement, making sure that you have an ordinance and it's updated. Dan already did a little bit of research on that. Ordinances, typically you'd want to say that you can cause an inspection, so you have the right either yourselves or for a company to come in and do an inspection of the property. And then also from an ordinance perspective, what happens if somebody doesn't comply. So either they don't comply with having a proper backflow prevention device or assembly installed, or if they're in violation and we continue to send them notices and say you're in violation, then ultimately that could either lead up to shutting water off or installing some sort of fine. So those are the 2 main things that technically you usually want to look for in having an ordinance. But we make sure that everything is proper, and then it also, you know, references back to Michigan Plumbing Code and all those things that need to be in there. One of the bigger pieces that we're really passionate about is the public awareness standpoint. So the question that you just asked, we have explainer videos that we can give you to be able to publish on your website, or have an FAQ webpage that is more of a microsite off of your city's website. So it explains all those things. It has an FAQ section, so everybody can, you know, really understand, again, what's the importance of having something like this in place. And then we do the actual on-site inspections. We send somebody out. We send all the notices, of course, to let the water customer know that we are going to be coming. There's more specific scheduling when it comes to residential, right? Because we want to give them enough notice to have you approve those lists, and then also to make sure that the resident or the commercial property knows that we're going to be coming to do the inspection. And then we document everything, every point of water use. And part of this as well, with residential, one of the main reasons why we tend to see them out of compliance is the hose bibs. So part of our recommendation is that we would hand out hose bib vacuum breakers as part of the program as an option to be able to get somebody into immediate compliance without having to go back and do a recheck or, you know, disturb them another time. And then on the enforcement side of things, so whether it's residential or commercial, if anybody is out of compliance, we would send out a letter where it would look like it would be coming from the city, saying this is why you're out of compliance, And this is what should happen if you need to get into compliance, if they can supply that to a plumber.
Yeah, just, and if I can real quick on that, you know, as far as enforcement, we can take you so far. Right. So we can, and we won't just send letters out. The enforcement letters are based on your ordinance. So you have two triggers in your ordinance. One is if you don't comply, we shut your water off. The other is a fine. Typically, all utilities I work with, they'll send that shut off letter. What we do is we will let Cheryl and folks at the water department know, Dan, hey, here's the list of people that are at that point, and have a conversation, like, how do you want us to proceed? We will package the letters up and mail them, or we can send them to you, or sometimes in smaller communities, somebody knows, you know, everybody knows everybody kind of places, you just go and talk to them, and sometimes that helps. But we can't be an actual enforcement arm, so I just want to make sure that part's clear. We can get you so far, but then that's the only point really where we come back to the city and say, hey, we've done everything we can do. Now we need, you know, you guys to step in, and, you know, Cheryl, the water department, Dan, to step in and kind of take it from there.
Brock, where's Eagle on this stuff right now? Where's Eagle's temperature on this right now? What are they
We're
willing?
okay right now.
Okay.
I don't report until March. At that point, it might get interesting.
So I'm looking at these project fees.
Yeah.
Can you explain them to us a little bit? I see like 3 different versions of.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the first option, if you want to, okay, this is commercial. So these are for your businesses, so commercial, industrial, multifamily, and then your government properties.
Yep, so this is, we have commercial in our footprint. You guys figure we gotta do inspections on. It's gonna be 83 and change a year over a 2-year contract, so a total of 16.6 over 2 years.
Yep, exactly.
That's step 1.
That is step one.
2 would be,
Step 2, or part of the program, would be the residential side. And I did 2 different options for residential, just so you can see kind of how it compares. So with what Eagle says, they recommend doing residential inspections either on a 5 or 10-year frequency. So I put both of those options in here to kind of show you what that would look like. So ultimately, it affects how many inspections that we would be doing in that 2-year time period. So if we put you on a 10-year frequency, you're not going to be doing as many inspections
Correct.
per year. That is technically good with Eagle. The reason why oftentimes we recommend a 5-year frequency is because for the homes that have the irrigation systems, they're required to test on a 5-year frequency. So it coincides with that, where if we run into a situation like that, they're also going to know they need to have the actual testing that needs to be done as well.
so best case, we're down to about $28,000 a year in expenses for this testing.
The expense isn't the city's responsibility.
Who pays for it, Eagle?
The customer.
The customer.
Your customer
Yeah,
does.
okay, better yet.
So yeah, if there's a deficiency in your system, you're required to resolve that, and then we
Who
get.
pays for the contract though, this contract right here?
We're
This is the
paying-
city.
This is, yeah.
Right, this is the city I'm talking about. It's 28 grand right here. Then the customer is responsible for fixing the issue if they find one.
Correct.
And we're responsible for enforcing that to Eagle's happy tune.
Correct.
Okay.
This gets you into compliance from a Eagle requirement, right, with everything that we're talking about. Again, the customer is still responsible for testing or fixing if there's any issues. But then that's where the ordinance comes into play, where if you need to enforce anything, then you can enforce it by either water shut off or fines, or leave it be, whatever you choose to do, knowing that, you know, the work was done to verify what the risk is and what's there at their property.
You guys can proceed with.
So that is, I mean, that was pretty much it. There was a couple of other things that were some details on here around public awareness. Again, this was one thing I do really want to make sure that you guys are aware of, because anytime we work with a city that hasn't worked with us before, the Public Awareness Toolkit is a great resource to be able to get the community involved and aware as far as what's going on and why a project like this is being enforced if you've never done it before, or it's been a really long time since they've had inspections. So whether it's their business or whether it's their home, it provides them with a lot of resources. We can do a program announcement letter where you can put it in your bills. Again, we provide digital content that you can have, or you can put on a city Facebook page or whatever it may be, pre-written social media links, explainer videos. So, I mean, we ourselves do a lot of our own training for the community and for other water purveyors. So we kind of extend that out into the communities we work with as well to make sure that they know really what cross connections even are. So. And then this is just a few more bits and pieces on the inspection itself and what happens. So when we go into a facility, so whether it's a business or a residence, everybody is, wearing a logo shirt or a hat so they know who they are. All of the information that we survey goes into our database or into our software on a tablet. So they're on the tablet, they enter everything in there with all the various details, and then that's the basis for being able to know whether they're in compliance or not. We document every point of water use, and then all that information is stored to be able to use later for either follow-up reports for violations, or just to be able to have the test tracking data on what facilities and what devices need to be tested.
I read through some of this, but are we required to do every single home and every single business
You
to
are.
start with?
Yes.
And that is, and it continues. I mean,
Right, it's not done.
residential is just, once every, 10 years or so, but it does.
It's recurring every, so yeah, if you do a 10-year frequency for residential, you're doing, again, about 10% every year. And then the commercial properties, they can be more high hazard depending on like what kind of connections they have to the water system, or more low hazard where they can be more on a frequency that is more similar to residential. So that's some of what we establish when we go in and we do the inspections, is what is the hazard level and what does that look like, and then that all gets approved by Eagle as well. So then you'll know, hey, we need to go there every year, or we need to go there every 5 years, depending on what that looks like.
And the residents, that would be every 10 years unless there was a problem?
Every 5 years or every 10 years, depending on the frequency that you would choose to do. Eagle
10.
does allow up to 10.
Yeah, 10 would be the minimum.
Yeah.
That's what I thought I read in there.
Yeah.
If a house has a sprinkler system, does it have to go to the 5-year plan?
No.
Okay.
But they have to be tested.
Yeah, they'll have to be, the backflow preventer itself would have to be on a testing schedule. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm trying to struggle through here. So a couple things that can be found at a home that would require that testing is the lawn irrigation system. The other thing could potentially be a boiler that's treated with any chemicals, or a water-assisted sump pump. Those are pretty much the three things in a home that would require a testable backflow preventer. Unfortunately, Eagle muddied the waters a little bit on the rules. So they said every backflow preventer has to be tested every 3 years, except non-chemically treated lawn irrigation can be tested once every 5 years. So that would be another thing we'd address in your ordinance probably, is establishing a hard testing frequency. We would suggest 3 years rather than 5, because it's confusing to have something that's done once every 3 years and something that's done once every 5 years. It's a lot harder to track, and they never coincide. So if you have two, typically, and I used to work as a tester, if you have two things at a property, you get a break on the cost. if you do them both at the same time, rather than coming out one year for one thing and the next year for something else. So it's just something down the road to think about. But it is two parts of the same program.
And so for right now, for this, it's, obviously this is a discussion only item. We're still doing our research, we're still looking for records to make sure that we didn't miss anything, or if we can find the testing records that could change the scenario. But this is something that we wanted you to be aware of, so as we go into the next budget cycle that we talk here in the next, probably start in the next couple months, that we will be potentially working at how we possibly integrate something like this into that. What I don't want to see from a compliance standpoint is, this really becomes a question of scope and ability to do it ourselves and our staffing level. We look at our water meter installs. That's a program I've said several times that generally a project of that size, you have a contractor do that. We didn't do that, and we're on year 8. This can't do that. We'll look at different various ways where we could integrate with a potential company like that to maybe take some cost of it to do our own, and try to work with someone like HydroCorp. So we're working through all these things and trying to get as much information as we can. But just wanted to get on your radar that.
Well, and it's good, to be proactive if we haven't got the,
It's an
Let's say
insurance
28,000 a
policy.
year, it's gonna be 47,000 a year, depending on if it's 5-year or a 10-year.
We could find our treasure chest, and we might find all the records that.
The worst part's gonna be the public.
I have,
That's the worst part of this.
one other question for you. When you go, I'm assuming that you have to go in the house for this testing?
Correct.
And how do you do the testing?
Well, we only do the inspections, not the testing.
Oh,
So remember,
okay.
it's two different parts of the same program. Dan brought meter, it's a lot like running a meter project. We'll send a series of letters and ask the homeowner to schedule an appointment with us. We'll set up both an online appointment portal where they can see the dates and times that are available, or they can call the office if they're more comfortable doing that. And then we schedule a time, and our inspector goes out. And I will say, we try to be we try to minimize how intrusive we are. So when I say we go in the house, we're typically going in the basement. That's where everything's at, typically. The boiler, the water meter, if they have a water softener, if they have a sump pump, all that stuff's in the basement. We aren't going into, master bathrooms and private bathrooms and kitchens and things like that. It's just, we're looking for the big ticket items that are really the more hazardous things, and then the outside of the home. And then what we do is we provide some public education while we're on site, brochures or really conversations to mirror the best public education. When you're at somebody's house, you can, explain things to them.
But you don't do the testing itself?
We do not do the testing. We track all of that. We would send all the notifications to the homeowners that it is a requirement that they would hire a local plumbing contractor to do that test. We maintain a list of the contractors that are certified to test backflow preventers, because not all plumbers are.
So does every house you go into have to be tested, or no?
No, it all depends on what they have.
Okay.
Probably the majority of your homes aren't gonna have anything that needs to be tested unless they have a lawn irrigation system. Those 3 things I talked about.
Okay.
But boilers is one?
I'm sorry?
Boilers is one that would require the
It-
testing?
It could be.
Only with the
So-
additives?
Only if there's additives. There's two different types of backflow preventers we can apply to boilers. One is testable, one's non-testable, and the plumbing code's very specific on what those situations are. So if there's no chemicals in the boiler, it's non-testable. We're just gonna make sure it's there.
Paul, you used the word intrusive, I wanna talk about that a little bit, so. Just from devil's advocate side, right? So the state tells us we gotta do this stuff. So you tell the homeowner, well, first you're gonna pay for you guys to come in and look at stuff, because obviously it's the city's money, that's taxpayers' money, right? Comes out of their pocket. Then number 2, they're gonna tell you if they gotta do something, and you're gonna have to pay for it all. And if you don't, we're gonna punish you because we can't get our water certification put through if they don't, right? So it's a very intrusive thing, I believe. No offense to you guys, I'm just saying from, it's a very intrusive thing for a taxpayer.
From that standpoint, I agree.
Well, it
I'm
is,
just
it
saying-
is, but we don't have a choice.
I understand, no, I understand, but I wanna make sure that they know that, it's not us, it's the state that's pushing us, so.
Right.
Yeah, we're-
Start voting a different way or something for the state, I don't know what to tell you.
Especially for low-income families that are in a situation that they didn't even know about.
I'm sure there's programs up there to help those type of folks, hopefully, but we'll have to see, Ricky, that's something else we'll have to probably dig into. Nice, very educational, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
And in the back of the packet, there's the cross-connection control program for the city of Norway that you guys adopted, and the ordinance that references the cross-connection policy, which was adopted in 2016. So you can kind of see, it talks about fines and penalties.
I was gonna say, I looked over that too today. Was there anything really huge that we had to change in there?
In this ordinance here compared to the previous one, I don't know.
Okay.
I kind of skimmed it. I didn't see anything glaring, without getting into specifics.
Right.
You might want to update some of the language just because it refers to a department that doesn't exist anymore. MDQ, you might want to change that wording to Eagle. And there might be a couple other minor tweaks, but like I said, I did skim through that, and it looks like whoever brought that forward took it right from the Eagle manual, which is essentially what we do too. I mean, we use theirs, so we know that they're going to accept it, and it's going to be in compliance with the rules. So I don't think there's any major ordinance issues. The plan might be another story because there's been some rule changes since the plan was put in place. No, not changes, updated language, is a better way to put it.
Thanks for coming up with your
Yeah,
cold.
really appreciate you guys being here and
Yeah, of
explaining
course.
it.
Thank you.
It was nice talking with you all, and we look forward to further conversations.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You know how much I love that shit.
Action, discussion items. Item number 3, 2025 city council meeting schedule. Dan?
So this is what we presented at the last meeting. There's been no changes. I don't know if, council had a chance to look at their upcoming schedules to see if there's any conflicts with this. Again, the only change we're recommending is that those first 2 January meetings, because of the first one falling on a holiday. So this is an actionable item. If council would like to approve the 25 council schedule, then we can start to get that posted. Again, the times and dates, on Mondays and Wednesdays, and depending on the time of year, that stays the same as it currently is. So then the only change really is currently that January, the 2 meetings in January.
Do I have a motion on the meeting schedule?
Motion we approve the 2025 council meeting schedule as presented.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Mararo?
Yes.
Mrs. Steigerwald?
Yes?
Mrs. Brew?
Yes. Item number 4, water department locator purchase request.
So this was also at the last meeting, council expressed an interest in looking at the cost to get one
Spending
similar
more money.
to the election department with the GPS capability. Cheryl got a couple of quotes, so we provided a very nice Cadillac version, which is probably more than we need.
You think?
Yeah, I read it and it sounds like we don't need that.
No, it probably not.
Does it give you a massage too when you're done? No?
The one that's more to the electric department one is the 5863. Theirs was a little more expensive because
There
they
you
got
go.
some attachments that were specific to what they do. We wouldn't necessarily need that. So it's about 1,000 more for that one. That would provide us that GPS ability. Scott Hagee also talked about getting some training, so kind of have everyone get together. I will say, this isn't a pressing item right now. The locates are, it's winter, they're slowing down.
I would recommend we take our time.
Yeah.
And pick up what we really need, and then by springtime. we can
Get it.
figure
Okay.
What we have right now works. I believe, pretty well, and integrating it with that OpenGov. You know, GPS is nice, but we are actually out there physically taking pictures of where your shut off is, uploading it to the .gov
Nice.
instantly, rather than, you know, for now, this will get us through. If there's something better, I think we need to put our minds together and come up with something in the spring.
And Jeff, you had a question on that, on the last meeting about this. How are they, you asked me, how are they putting that information in? And Brock gave me a very good tutorial
The process,
of how they do
right.
that. And yes, they have to do it, but it does work well. Now, I still think at some point we need a new locator, and for 1,000 more to have everyone similar, I think it's a good discussion to have. But we're not doing a lot of locates and digging.
Not right now.
So you don't want us to move on this at all
You
right
could
now?
if you want to, but you don't need to.
Table it till further, or we'll bring it back to you?
We'll just bring it back probably. Don't table it because we don't want to need a specific
Right.
date on it. You know, we're looking at, you know, if going into next year, we'll have a new budget. So this will be something that we'll probably specifically budget for.
You want it in the spring, don't you think, Brock?
So,
You probably want it this spring,
so
before the
we'll
new
probably
budget,
fit it
probably.
this way.
Yeah, we'll fit it this way.
Yeah.
You'll need it in spring when the digging starts. Yeah.
So we'll probably just bring it back once we feel comfortable of what we
Yeah.
need, and then we'll go.
I'm good with that. Ken?
Yeah, that's fine, just from, if we're not gonna move on it, don't put it under, action item, please.
Yep, yeah, that's where we had originally, and then once we sat down and talked about it, we decided it wasn't necessary, but I did want to provide you that option to action it if you so chose.
Okay. Move on to mayor council comments. Ricky?
No comment.
Brett?
I have none, thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, I just want to thank the staff for doing such a great job on the audit, all the department heads. You know, obviously, our funds look way better this year than they did last year. Dan, especially. I know you were pretty stressed at this point last year, going into this thing and trying to figure out how we're going to get these fund balances we need to. And I just want to, you know, like I said earlier, I'm the first one to, you know, give you a kick when I think a kick is needed, and I just want to give you an attaboy when an attaboy is deserved. So, big game last week. Right team won, by the way. Go blue. And we got a big game tomorrow night. Oh, you hurt me now. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
I also want to thank Scott for coming in. I want to thank the staff. Our budgets look a lot better. You know, personally thank Mary Pollard coming in, Natalie coming back and helping, and then Lisa and Jamie in the office for helping with that. So, I mean, it took a few people to get it together, but I think we're very fortunate to have people who are willing to come back and help us out like this. We're very lucky. And nice budget, Dan. Good job, and, you know, it looks a lot better than last year, and thanks to the department heads, too. That's all I have. Oh, and don't forget the Christmas parade.
Jesus.
On Friday. We have a lot going on here Friday, so come on out and enjoy the night.
There is a rumor that Santa and Mrs. Claus are coming from the North Pole, and they've got a new favorite elf, I heard, this year.
Dan?
I just wanted to mention the Christmas in Norway and the Santa parade. So this does start at 3:30 with a winter market at the Legion Hall. We have a Norway senior class all-night party, hot chocolate bar and s'more pit at Veterans Park.
That's awesome.
3:30 to 7, 4 to 5:30. We have the Dickinson County Kids Craft. That's here in the basement of City Hall. At the same time, we have face painting at the Legion. And then 5:30 to 5:35, we'll have the lighting of the Christmas tree and the whole band shell area. And between 6 and 6:30, we'll do the parade fireworks. And the fireworks parade fireworks.
Fireworks parade.
Fireworks parade.
And then we'll have, I believe, Mrs. and Mrs. Claus here at City Hall to greet the children.
And the elf, don't forget that special elf.
There may be a very attractive elf.
Yes.
Well, by the way, check out the local businesses on Main Street. I think the kids from, the art students are gonna start doing windows.
They already did.
They did the
It was in the
windows already,
paper.
We
right?
had our windows done here.
And I know a lot of the businesses are gonna be putting out little treats and things like that, so, come early.
Yeah, we have a lot more going on this year than we did last year, so come out and enjoy it.
Yep.
Grant?
Nothing, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
I support.
Mrs. Steigerwald?
Yes?
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Moraro?
Yes.